Hi, everyone. Welcome to the Shadows and Secrets deep dive series. I am Samantha Skal.
And I am Kerry Savage. And together we're Shadows and Secrets, a series of retreats and an online community for mystery, thriller, suspense, and horror authors.
You can find out more on shadowsandsecrets.com.
Ooh. We are both book coaches and authors, and we love talking about story. This is I'm not even sure anymore, 15th, 16th, I lost count, in our
Yeah.
series of big time spoiler alert, big time, deep dives into scary books we love, where we talk about twists, structure, masterful misdirection, villains, and anything else that strikes our fancy about MTS, which is the overarching genre term for mystery, thriller, and suspense. But first, I would like to introduce my co-founder of Shadows and Secrets, Sam. Tell the people a little bit more about what you do as a book coach.
Thank you so much, Carrie. I am a writer and a book coach who loves working with writers to make their fictional ideas, come to life. I also really focus on twisty novels. So,
Mhm.
from brainstorming twists is my superpower, and I especially dig talking about villains. So, Carrie, tell the people who you are.
Well, one of the reasons we work so well together is because I also love helping writers bring their fictional ideas to life. But for me, I am super into immersive settings and I really love details that pull you into a book's world. So, and I ask a lot of questions. That is probably my superpower. So,
You sure
very,
do.
very Socratic. So yeah, that's me.
Excellent. So, as a reminder, we're going to be giving away everything, including the key plot points. So, if you haven't read today's book, hit pause, go read it, and then come back.
Seriously, there are no secrets left unturned, so consider this your final spoiler alert warning. The structure of these talks is the same every time. We are going to read the book jacket copy and talk about what the author has done to manipulate us before we even start.
And then we will read the first page and what the author has done to manipulate us there.
And then we will break down each of the major twists in terms of how the author did it, what percentage of the way through it happened, and what on screen clues existed so that the twist worked.
And we are going to talk about how the author accomplished the overall misdirection and manipulation of the reader, and the way the author used language or setting or other elements to set the reader up for maximum fear.
Which is why we read the scary shit, right? We like to be scared by fiction.
We absolutely do. Okay, are we ready?
We are ready. Let's do it.
All right. So today's book is by Stephanie Wrobel, and it is the Hitchcock Hotel. Am I in the right place? Oh, it's
You
like,
are.
yeah, kind of
It's a
hard to
little
see.
washed out, but
A little hard to see. Sorry, Stephanie. What a bonkers ride this book is. I remember
very
reading it right
fun.
when it came out and absolutely loved it. And rereading it this week for this discussion has just been awesome. So, Carrie, can you head us into the book jacket copy,
I
please?
sure can. So this is from my Kindle edition. There is a little bit of editorializing that I'll just
Mhm.
kind of skip over because, it was just USA Today bestseller and some good little blurbs.
Yeah,
And get right
casual
into.
blurb from Riley Sager.
Oh yeah, that happens to be on the bottom of my copy, but yeah, that just casual blurb, like you said, from Riley Sager. No
Absolutely
big,
incredible. Like,
no
what a
big.
dream. What a dream. Yeah.
So here's where we get into it. Alfred Smedell is not your average Hitchcock fan. He is the founder, owner, and manager of the Hitchcock Hotel, a sprawling Victorian house in the White Mountains dedicated to the master of suspense. There, Alfred offers his guests round the clock film screenings, movie props, and memorabilia in every room, plus an aviary with 50 crows. Wild. To celebrate the hotel's first anniversary, he invites his former best friends from his college film club for a reunion. He hasn't spoken to any of them in 16 years, not after what happened. But who better than them to appreciate Alfred's creation and to help him finish it? After all, no Hitchcock set is complete without a body.
God, it's so good.
It is
So
delish.
good. Such a good setup. Um, this one actually doesn't follow, shocker, because we're talking about
Mm,
a book on our deep dive series and nothing follows what we expect it to because it just works. But this one, I would say that the book jacket copy doesn't set us up like a normal thriller, right? Like we don't have that, dun dun dun, and he must choose between this and this, which is a very classic and tried and true way to write a book, but write like effective book jacket copy. This just sort of sets up the story and gives us a lot of questions. And so,
Which is sometimes all it really needs to do, right? Because what you're
Yeah.
trying to do ultimately is pique the reader's curiosity. You want them to pick up the book. We often like it and we expect it to see that story, what we identify as the story question in there, but it's not in here. At least it's not immediately obvious in here, and that's still okay. I mean, you've the last line, no Hitchcock set is complete without a body. I mean, we know what we're in for, right?
Oh
You
God, it's
still
so
set
good.
very good expectations about this group of friends is going to come back together for this weekend. Alfred's got plans. They sound pretty nefarious. So, like, yeah, let's get into it.
Yeah, yeah, and I think the plans thing, having that in the book jacket copy sets the reader up well because we don't actually learn what his plans actually, his plans truly are until the very end, right? Like after the reveal of everything. Um, but I think it's nice to know that, not nice, it is intriguing as the reader to know that this group is walking into like a trap, basically.
Right,
Right.
right.
And so the suspense is sky high from the beginning. And she also does such a good job of sort of like dribbling out the information about what happened. I mean, the reveal of what happened is its own climactic arc.
Hmm.
And it's very well done. And the dual time, I mean, it's not dual timeline, it's all done through flashbacks, but
Hmm.
I can't wait to talk about that because it's like a master class in how to keep the suspense high for something that everyone knows happened, but keeping it relevant to what's going on right now.
Well, and
Right.
we know something happened, but we don't find out anything about what that is. We just have them all alluding to it in their
Yeah.
interiority throughout until we find out that really what everybody think happened. They all have different ideas about
Yes.
what it is that they think happened. I mean, I was thinking about a lot about Andy Pliego's book when I was reading this in terms of like the layers that go into unveiling what is actually going on beneath the surface here and how both of these writers, both Stephanie and Andy, used the multiple POVs so
Hmm.
successfully to peel those layers of the onion back. I mean, these are two really, really wonderful examples of how to use multiple POVs to your advantage as a writer. So, masterclass that way.
So well observed and said.
Thank
Completely
you.
agreed. Yeah. Yeah, I would love to hear what the murder board looked like
Right?
for making
Right?
this book. I mean, we said the same thing with Andy's. It just like it's just so complex and there's
Yes.
so much and figuring out who knew what when about what is
Mhm.
so fascinating. And I imagine there had to be one for the college timeline,
Oh,
because
for sure.
and
Yeah.
let's just get it out there so that we can talk about it up front. Like the reveal at the very end is that Grace, one of the college friends, is the one to have pushed the doctor, their
The
professor, off
professor,
this
yeah.
building. Because he was threatening, she thought he was threatening to expose her for her cheating scandal. She had this cheating business that she was running with our protagonist, Alfred. Protagonist maybe is kind of also not. I don't know.
We're gonna
Um,
have a fun discussion about
we'll
that.
get there. Um, I mean, he totally is, but then he dies. So
Right,
like,
right.
yeah. So anyway, that is what happens. But everyone else thinks that Alfred killed. Like Zoe thinks that he killed the professor. And the other ones don't really even know that anything happened. They just think the professor died. It was like no big deal. But Julius thinks that his big thing is that he exposed Alfred's cheating scandal, which was actually Grace's cheat. It's just like everything is so intermixed and
Well, yeah, because you go from like this isn't probably a scale I would normally use, but most ignorant to most knowledgeable. And I think what it's like TJ and maybe Samira. I hope I'm saying that right.
yeah,
They kind of know about like they know that Alfred got expelled because of the cheating scandal, but that's really
right,
all that they know. And then Julius knows a little more, and Zoe knows a little more, and then Grace
right.
and Alfred know what really happened because they were the two of that were there.
Yeah,
So,
yeah,
there's all of those layers that are unpeeled over the course of these books, and you are taken into everybody's perspective, so you understand what each of them know. And yet, as the reader, you kind of you know more, and you also don't know more because you don't ultimately know what the big final thing is until the end. So she manages to like walk that line of revealing enough to the reader so that we feel satisfied of like, oh no, like, well, Zoe thinks this and Zoe's like way wrong. Like this isn't what happened, but she's also not totally wrong. And
Yeah.
it messes with us and also makes us feel smart, which is like exactly why we read these kinds of books.
Yeah. Yeah. Totally. Um, you just made me think that uh we think Alfred's a villain. We're on his side, right? But he's the one orchestrating this whole thing. It's sort of like um we know he has a good reason, that he thinks it's a good reason for doing all
Hmm.
of this. We know that we sort of start to get the hint that like he's gonna murder someone to make the hotel popular. Which, great concept for a book, right? But
Absolutely. And a very like genius idea in a completely
yeah.
unhinged way.
Yeah, like evil unhinged genius. Totally.
Yeah.
Totally. But like we're on his side because we're like, "Oh, you were wronged in college, right? Like
Hmm.
you were holding a big old grudge and you're about to burn it all down." And, that's what we think is going on with him. And then it turns out he's actually kind of like a victim of Grace at the end because she manipulated the hell out of him. And yes, he
Hmm.
made some terrible choices, and also he's the one who held this grudge. And he also didn't say anything about what actually happened that night. And so the professor who dies, who was gonna, stage 4 lung cancer, like he was months away from death anyway, but that does not excuse murdering
No,
someone.
no.
Right. And so Danny being his wife and then like having this even longer grudge to come back and take out the people that she needs to take out and then just like right off into the sunset, that was also very delicious.
Yeah, it really was. Well, I think
But
like, Alfred as a protagonist is so interesting because you have a certain amount of sympathy for him. Of course you do. He's our
yeah,
protagonist. We are set up to. And, I was immediately antagonistic towards Zoe because she was so mean to him. And you find
yeah,
out that like they all like he was kind of the butt of everybody's joke and they didn't treat him very well and nobody ever apologized for anything. But then you also start to see their side of like how he's kind of creepy and he kind of has this master plan and you have conflicting feelings about him. I think at least I did. I was just like,
oh,
well, I
absolutely.
feel bad
Yeah.
for him, but at the same time, like he's not someone that you can fully empathize with. Does
No,
want to
but
murder somebody to bring publicity to
right.
his hotel, so there is that. But he also like we've all sort of probably known that awkward person who probably doesn't even know or does realize they're awkward but doesn't know how to change it. And
Right.
they're not all evil geniuses by any means, but like you can relate to that in some way. Sometimes you've felt that way. So yeah, he's a really interesting protagonist, and then the choice to off him so early is.
It's fantastic.
But let's
Yeah.
get into it. Let's do you want? Should we read the
Yeah.
prologue?
Yeah. Well, I was just gonna one more thing on
Oh, sure.
Alfred. Like I think that his interiority is what makes all of this work, right?
Mm,
Because we're learning why he's doing what he's doing, basically.
hmm.
We don't exactly know what the plan is or what he's gonna be doing or everything, but we know that he has this master plan. And then the deliciousness of him being puppeted by somebody else is awesome. So,
Yeah,
yeah,
more layers.
more layers, more
Actually,
layers.
puppeted by two people in some ways, right? Because he and Grace have this back and forth where he is sort of her puppet,
Yeah.
but also not. And then the whole
Yeah.
thing being masterminded by Danny is just,
It's
yeah.
awesome. It's awesome. And we will, as we always do, define a twist as an assumption proved incorrect. So Alfred's assumption is that he's the one running the show.
Mhm.
Grace thinks that she's gotten away with it. Nobody suspects Danny of doing anything because nobody realizes that Danny was related to Dr. Scott, the person that they killed.
Right.
And so, the reason that that comes up as twisty is because it's a reveal of a truth that we didn't even think to ask about.
Gotcha.
The logic was there for some other logical explanation, and the reveal of it is what makes it twisty.
Yep.
I just love it so much. Okay, so there's three quotes that I just want to read really quickly because you know, I mean, this whole like is an homage to Hitchcock, and I am not a Hitchcock scholar. I have not watched every single
Neither.
movie.
Yeah.
But I know enough to know that they're creepy, and did such a good job. I mean, he was like the master of suspense, right?
Hmm.
Like so scary. So this is from Strangers on a Train. My theory is that everyone is a potential murderer. Great setup. From Rope, which is the cat and which is the mouse, which gives away the entire story, by the way. Like,
Yeah.
that's Danny, and we don't even know to think about it. Amazing. Stephanie Wrobel, bless you.
Well, and doesn't she actually pick up on that theme again? This just came to me. I didn't even notice it in my notes, I don't think. But with something that Grace and TJ say when they're in bed that Alfred records and catches, and then is the reason that he like clues he says something to TJ about being the mouse.
Right, right. Well, the mouse and a cookie and give a glass of milk, and the milk is
That's
like
it.
a whole
Okay.
creepy thing that Danny, like it's awesome.
Yeah.
And then from Psycho, we all go a little mad sometimes, which is just delightful. Okay. Here is the prologue. And I couldn't decide. I'm fairly certain that this is omniscient POV, but it's also kind of like zoomed in third on the crow.
Mm.
So I went with omniscient as my assessment of it, but I welcome your thoughts. So here's the prologue. The crow waits until the guilty one disappears, then he flies down the hallway. How he wound up in this part of the hotel, he cannot recall. He has no memory of the tartan wallpaper, the dim flicker of the sconces. He does not know which humans lie behind which doors. He only knows to obey the scream of his instincts. What a sentence.
Right.
Leave now, go. Danger hangs over this place like a blackening cloud. The people inside are not to be trusted. The crow rests for a moment on the horse hanging from the sky. He dares not wait long. Soon they will all rise again. Soon there will be much commotion. He did not catch much more than a glimpse, but a glimpse was all he needed. Such an ugly shape the limbs made, the neck contorted. The thing hardly looked human at all. The crow takes to the air again, finds himself ever more eager to return home to his kin. What will the rest of the murder think? He flies around and around, yet still he cannot locate the path back to the aviary. It's no use. He's trapped like the rest of them.
Mm.
It's just like such a visceral, like obviously someone dies,
Yep.
and there's some great language in there, which I know you have noticed probably more than I have.
I mean, I think it's not the only thing that makes this a successful prologue, but I think in all of the ones off the top of my mind that I remember in the books, and we've probably half of the books that we've done on the deep
Yeah.
dive have prologues. On top of serving another story purpose, they all do a wonderful job of really immersing you in the setting and using that visceral kind of language that tells you what kind of ride you're in for. So I
Yeah.
think like that's one, it's not the primary job of the prologue, because then I would say if it's only scene setting, like you really should question whether or not do you need it. But it does a fantastic job. They all have done a fantastic job of doing that. I'm thinking of like the Andy Bart's book,
Yeah.
where like it's again kind of a similar kind of thing where the camera lens is zooming in a little bit, like you're outside and you're seeing the crime happen. Which another thing, sorry, this just popped into my head again. I guess it's that kind of day, where like the zooming in and setting up the stage for like here is the body, which we are then not like it's the slow burn. So it really like it plants the seed strongly immediately. Like there is a body, something is going to go down.
Yeah.
But then you don't actually really come back to that until the midpoint or a little bit thereafter. So it's almost like it's really serving that suspense setting purpose.
Totally. Yeah. Well, I
With
mean,
something that feels a little like I wouldn't say this is a total slow burn, but the first half felt like a bit of a slow burn.
yeah. Yeah, I would agree with that. And we've talked about this before too. Like the way that we define suspense is we don't even know what to be scared of or what to be fighting against, but we know there's something creepy there, which is also horror, right?
Mm.
Like we know there's going to be something scary because we're told that it's horror, but we don't know what it is. And so the suspense is sky high. We're like, we don't even know what to be, we don't even know what to be nervous about. And so every interaction is terrifying, right?
Well, especially here, we know there's a body, but we have no
Right.
idea. There are at least six people that it could be, because we're
We don't
already
know who.
kind of like we're writing off like it's not any of the staff, right? I mean, I guess it could be Danny because she's more than staff, but the other people are there and then they disappear. So it's one of the
Yeah.
group. We know it's one of the group. We just don't know who.
Yeah. Yeah.
So that
It's
is a
the
question that's hanging over us for as
Well,
we
which
read, which is
would make
perfect.
it a mystery, but I also, because mystery is we're trying to figure out what
Right.
happened to something. A thriller is we're trying to stop a thing from happening. The
Hmm.
genre blending that happens in mystery, thriller, suspense is obviously all of these, right? I would argue that we should have, what does it say on Amazon for where they classified this? I would guess it's
I don't know.
psychological suspense, but um, anyway, the fact that we see the dead body on page one, which is a prologue,
Hmm.
even though it's not, we know it's in the future, we assume it's in the future, and we are not seeing enough to understand this is what was going to be investigated, right? It's not a true mystery,
Right.
but we're given a very strong indication that this is going to be something where someone dies, right? And
Hmm.
so we're not going to be shocked. And as you just said, like we're wondering who it's going to be. And so the suspense is already raised.
Yeah.
And I would argue if she had started it with chapter one, which I'll read in just a second,
Mm.
that first page, like we'd still be intrigued, right? We have enough from Alfred to be like, wow, this guy's crazy, and is gonna be murdering his friends, we sort of think maybe, but it's not the same level of suspense as it is when we know that someone's going to die.
Yes, and we don't know who or what, or we know we've been the establishing shot, and I just like saw the first line of the first page, so that terminology is now in my head, but we have an establishing shot before our establishing shot that is
Yes.
kind of laying out like here's where we don't know exactly when that's going to happen, but this is where we are taking you to. This is actually like the beginning of, not the beginning of the journey, but like, oh, I'm putting you halfway through, and the fun that we're going to go on, at least for a while, is going to be that how did we get there?
Yeah.
You know?
Well, and the
So,
the parallels to a movie because Hitchcock, like
sure.
it's all the framing is awesome.
Yeah.
Um, Okay, so she has Act One, right after the prologue, and then a quote from Hitchcock that says, "Always make the audience suffer as much as possible." Amazing. And then Thursday, October 12th. So framing, where I would sort of assume with that sort of entrance into a book is that this is going to be a very short timeline, right?
Yes.
We're looking at like maybe 48 hours,
Right.
which I love personally.
I know.
Yes.
It's
All
great.
right. One, Alfred. Let us begin with an establishing shot. So it's just such a good, yeah. I just love it so much. A three-story Victorian house stands alone on a hill in the White Mountains. The house boasts a wraparound porch, mansard roof, I don't actually know what that is, and bay windows. Despite the building's age, her shingles gleam, shutters sparkle. In other words, she is beloved. We swoop in through an open window on the third floor to reveal a handsome hotel room. A woman with a face of cracked earth leans against a four-poster bed, watching a man in his 30s survey himself in the pedestal floor mirror. I twist away from the mirror to face my housekeeper. How do I look? Danny takes her time considering me. Like Norman Bates, she jokes. I scowl. I meant my outfit. Not many men can pull off a turtleneck, particularly with a suit, she says. You look good, Alfred. Too much? I ask, holding the pocket square to my chest. She scrunches her nose and nods. I toss the silk square, that's really hard to say, back on
It
my desk and then hand her my stack of note cards. Quiz me. You've been over these 100 times. Go on. I turn back to the mirror. Danny sighs and pulls one from the deck. What are Samira's children's names? Aditi and Shivam. Got that from Facebook. TJ's official title? Freelance security specialist. LinkedIn. Zoe's drink of choice? Lagavulin with one ice cube. This detail took some effort. I started by calling St. Vincent, pretending to be a devoted fan who wanted to send a celebratory bottle to the head chef's way. Imagine my surprise when I was told Zoe was on indefinite leave from the restaurant she opened. From there, I turned to Instagram and tallied up all her photos with alcohol in them. In 12%, she held a glass of red wine. In 36%, she gripped a pint. And in a solid 52%, a glass of scotch sat by her place setting. In the Scotch photos, a bog of Lagavulin appeared in the background 9 times out of 10. I've stocked half a dozen bottles just to be safe. I'll stop there.
a lot of
So
Lagavulin.
obviously, super creeper, right? Like,
Hmm. Yes, light internet stalking, or maybe more than light.
yeah, I mean, it's honestly impressive how you could do just a lot.
Well, and you get
Uh,
the sense of how deep he's gone when he's doing these
yeah,
breakdowns of the percentages of what drinks have been in her, Facebook or Instagram posts. Like, okay, creeper.
yeah, yeah. So, we understand even from just from that first page that he is planning something. This is important to him, right? This weekend. We don't know yet that he's doing this, for nefarious reasons, but let me just see if we get to the end of the first chapter. I think we we have a hint that there's going to be something going on. I'm not going to look for it while we're recording, but
Hmm.
I had a note that that we do get a hint. Oh yeah, yeah. Okay, at 4%, what I've done, what I'm doing is a risk. And then we end the chapter with and action, which is
Mhm.
another homage to the movie thing. But
Right.
yeah, lots of good hints. And I just want to call out as well that this introduction to all these people was very well done because it's a
Yes.
pretty big cast and it would be
Mhm.
easy to get confused. But because they arrive one by one, we're getting Alfred's translation of who these people are to him and how much they suck. Um, and in that way, we have some like, kind of anchoring characteristics of each. And it was well done because it's a lot of people.
Well, and I think also that, like, Stephanie does a good job of doling out POVs. So, like, we immediately, I think it's actually in the next chapter, we go into Zoe. Is it Zoe
Yeah,
or Zoe?
Zoe. I don't know.
Yeah. Um, we go into her POV, but then we go, I think, back and forth, and she doesn't introduce another one for a little bit, and then other people like Julius and Grace, we have to wait until we're well further into the book and before we get their POVs. So I think both the way that she's doling that out and really using them like when she absolutely needs them helps because it lets us establish some people and their POVs pretty firmly in our minds
Yeah.
before we get too far, like you said. And I also thought she did an excellent job of giving each of them enough of a voice that it didn't feel like affect, like sometimes I think voiciness can almost go too far and you feel like, oh, here's the author really trying to differentiate a voice. This felt really natural. Like Zoe's just
Yeah.
really angry, like really
Yeah.
angry, and everything is sarcastic and she doesn't trust anybody and she's just pissed off at the world. And TJ is just like constantly like checking everything out and looking around and assessing, but also distracted because of all the shit that he's got going on. And so through their interiority and their reasons that they're all there, which she doesn't come out and say, but she alludes to, like it gives us enough of a differentiator between each of the voices that they feel distinct. So
Totally. Yeah, absolutely.
that's the way
Um,
to manage a good sized cast of characters because yeah, we
yes.
get everybody's POV at least a few times. So that's six POVs, which ordinarily
Mhm.
you and I are like, are you sure that's what you want to do? Like,
It's a
we would
bold
never say
choice.
no, but it's a bold choice.
Yeah. No, it works. It works. I didn't actually do the count of like how many chapters each person has. I should
Yeah.
have. I mean, I think the majority of them are Alfred. Zoe has a fair number. And so let's talk about the protagonist, right?
Mm.
So assumption when we walk into a book is the first POV we see is the protagonist, aside from the prologue, right? Prologues
Mhm.
are their own little beastie.
Yes.
But chapter one, Alfred, we assume he's the protagonist.
And also, we learn relatively quickly as she introduces other POVs that he is the only person we meet in first person. So even though close third is still
Ah,
intimate, he is the only one who gets the I pronouns and who, so, in terms of our lovely octopus, he's the only one from whom we are seeing here rather than here.
yeah.
So that's another
That's
point towards he is our protagonist, I think.
very well observed. Danny is also in first person, but we don't even see her
Oh,
POV
okay.
until like 90%.
Yeah. Yeah.
So it's a little different and also an interesting choice. Like it kind of,
Yeah. Okay.
yeah. Okay, so Alfred being the protagonist, I agree. But there is this like rule out there that you're not supposed to kill off your protagonist halfway through the book. Um, and let me see what was it 56%? Is that what you found?
It was 56, 57. It was a little late because I was like looking, I was in that point of the book where I'm like, where's the midpoint? Where's the midpoint? And I do
Yeah.
feel like there was like a mini turn, like right around 50%, but I really feel like his death is like the midpoint turn of the book, really.
Oh, I agree. Yeah. I mean, I didn't look at my Kindle to see when it started, but I imagine it was pretty close. Exactly 50%
Mm.
was the next day. So it's Saturday, October 14th,
Okay, yes, I
or
think
the
yes.
third day.
That's where I had
Um,
is when Julius wakes up, and that is like just at 50%. We're at a new start of a new day. I said in my notes, there's no real twist, just some unravelings, which
yeah,
is,
yeah.
um, which is fine. We use these as sort of benchmarks to judge where we are and to sort of assess, as like in a manuscript or in a finished novel, where these things are happening. But it's not a hard and fast rule that it has to be at 50%. I think it needs to be where it needs to be. And in the book, it felt fine that, if we are considering Alfred's death, the true midpoint turn, like it's a
Yeah.
little later. That's okay. It's
It's
fine.
okay. It works. I mean, I
Yep.
do love it when it's exactly 50%,
I know
but
you do.
um yeah, so he dies and another very bold choice, as is having the final twist of Danny being the one behind everything in first person as a brand new POV at like, in the last 10% of the book, like it works, right? We're like, oh damn, oh, she manipulated everything.
Yep.
And it works. It's one of those things where like, what if out of the gate, like if you were conceptualizing this book and pitching it to an editor or something, and you were like, I want to kill off the protagonist and at 50%, and I want, six or seven POVs, and this is what I'm doing. Like it would be like, okay, let's see how,
Let's see
let's
how it
see
goes. Let's see how
let's
it
see how it
works.
goes. And like, do we actually need all of this? And we'd poke at it, right? Because
Yes.
we just want to make sure that it's not going to be confusing. At no point was I confused in this book, which is a testament to her writing and her ability to, as you said, anchor each of these POVs in a very different person.
Mhm.
Yeah, I also wondered if Zoe might be like she's not the protagonist, right? Alfred is 100%, but she's also the one who leads us through the entire story. So in that
Yeah.
way, she's a very important secondary character. She's also the only one that has any kind of emotional aha moment.
So I'm so glad you said that because like when I was thinking about doing these talks for this book and I was like very jokingly, of course, and lovingly shaking my fist at you a little bit because I'm like, this one's hard. Like
It's really hard.
where like with our protagonist dying at roughly a midpoint, like he doesn't get to have an emotional aha moment, which normally might be a little unsatisfying for a reader. We usually like to have that payoff, but to your point, if somebody does, then we feel like there is a payoff there. And also, I think because, we're sort of on the fence about how we feel about Alfred, that it's not like, oh no, like Alfred, you unjustly ended up at the bottom of the stairs,
Yeah.
but really it is that there is an emotional payoff for the reader at some point in the last, 20%, 25% of the book. So do you want to talk about that moment? Because I was like, I'm not sure where I would find the emotional
Yeah, I'm
aha.
not sure.
So
I'd love to talk about the climactic sort of whole reveal of everything first.
sure.
So
Yeah.
I didn't really come down on like a place where I thought that we had a climactic confrontation.
Mm.
Some of the ideas were, Samira decides to come clean about pushing him, or not pushing him, but like she startled him and he fell,
Yeah.
and so she feels
I think she pushed
responsible.
him. She pushed
Did she
him.
push?
I'm
Okay.
pretty sure she did. I was laughing because, and maybe it's been a minute since I've seen a Swiss Army knife, but when she would like, they even in the book itself, when she's recreating that, and there was another place where it was described, and it's like, I saw the glint of the knife and it was coming down. I'm like, and trust me, like there was a piece of me that was like, oh no, that would be terrifying, no matter what size. But also, isn't a Swiss Army knife like the size of like a nail file?
I mean, it would be like 3 or 4 inches, but yeah, it would.
Like,
It's
it's
like it
not that
would.
it wouldn't be scary. It would be, but I
It
was
would
like,
be, but it's not
this
like a
isn't
butcher
like
knife.
the
Yeah.
the big butcher knife cliche kind of thing that
Yeah.
we see.
From Hitchcock.
Anyway,
Yeah, I agree. And so, and Samira has her own thing where she's hiding this, the breakdown of her marriage, which she's actually kind of stoked about, and she's pregnant, and like
mm-hmm.
everything's complicated, but it kind of feels okay. And her coming clean was, it felt like the right thing to do, first of all. And so that was part of the climactic confrontation
And fit her character. I'm
and
not
fit
sure any
her.
of the like all of the other ones ultimately like they all faced that pivot moment
Yeah.
in their POV character in their POV sections where they were being interviewed. They all faced the moment of come clean with whatever truth was gonna to come clean about, and they all decided not to, except for her, which felt very
Yeah.
true to her character.
It did, yeah. And then, around this time, like 79, like getting into 80%, we learned that TJ took kickbacks and is asking Julius for help, and they have like a reconciliation, we learn that Julius is facing some kind of cancer diagnosis. I sort of assumed prostate cancer based
I
on
said
his.
testicular at some
Oh,
point.
okay. Yeah.
Yeah.
So that's super scary, but like they're not, these things are happening sort of around what's going on. And then we learn at 80% that Grace, through a flashback, and I want to talk about the flashbacks too,
Mm.
slept with Alfred again to keep him quiet, to keep him from like ratting her out.
Mm.
And then we learn at 82% that the police tell Samira that there was a rope mark under Alfred's turtleneck. And so he was strangled, and so she's not responsible. And then we go and we like have all these other POVs that are not, Samira or Grace that are like TJ sort of alludes that Dr. Scott had died. Like he's like, he fell or jumped. We don't really know. Like it was a mystery. And then 83% Zoe saw Alfred on campus when the doctor had died. And so she assumed that he had pushed her.
Mhm.
And then we have Grace doing a flashback and thinking about and revealing that she shoved him at 86%, which is actually the true sort of like climactic moment,
Right.
but it's also not in story present.
Right. Right. Which is like, wow. Like that
Yeah,
is not a typical choice.
not a typical choice. And then, we learn that Alfred tells her that Dr. Scott had no idea that she was involved, and so she just straight up murdered him. Um, and we learn, some other stuff. It kind of goes from there, but and then Danny knew about all of them at like 90%
Mhm.
is the big reveal there. But there's not actually ever a like climactic confrontation of any kind, except for Danny revealing what she has done. So it's like looking back at the climactic confrontation.
Yeah, I mean, the closest thing we get is those moments that you just pointed out between Grace and Alfred, where, and it's a couple of moments, right? It's that
Yeah.
moment where he's about to get in the car and go, but then sort of alludes to like, you're going down with me. And she's like, all right, I'm going to sleep with him to try to keep him on side. And then the moment after Grace has pushed Dr. Scott off the roof and Alfred picks up the glasses and says like, like we're together, like we're bound together forever kind of thing. And also, was that the moment that he told her that was lying to her that
Yeah.
Dr.
Yeah.
Scott never
Yeah.
knew? So I mean, that is like the confrontation between our two. If we're saying that Alfred is our protagonist, which I still believe in, that's
Yeah.
the confrontation between the biggest
Yeah.
antagonistic force, I mean, outside of Danny,
Right.
and the protagonist. So really that's probably our climactic moment. But to your point, like it happens in story past.
It happens in story past, but it's so relevant to story present
Yeah.
because Zoe, this is her emotional aha, is when she decides to come clean in a way that
Hmm.
she hasn't for 16 years, right? She's been holding this. She
Yes.
thinks that
Right.
Alfred did it. She has no idea about Grace, but she was like, I told the detectives everything. I have come clean. I feel unburdened.
Hmm.
And, as emotional, it's a change for her, right? Like
It feels like she does say it now that you're bringing this back to me. Like she does say something to the effect of, for the first time in 16 years, like
I
I
feel,
feel, it's not I because it's not in first person, but
yeah,
it's close enough that it does have that ring of emotional aha that you and I always talk
yeah,
about in like two or 1 to 3 sentences, that pivotal moment where the person goes, I am changed. Now I was this and now I
yes.
am this.
Yeah. Well, and for her, it's all wrapped up in her drinking, which she
Mhm.
attributes, she drinks because she's trying to forget and like not deal with what
Right.
she saw Alfred do and the fact that she's kept it a secret. And
Yeah, that's
so,
what really weighs on her, right? Is that she never
yeah,
said anything at the time and she feels super guilty about that.
yeah.
Um, because he
Yeah. So
threatened her too. So,
it's a good emotional aha, but we don't see it actually happen. That's the other thing is that we learn that she told the detectives everything and what it meant to her after.
mhm.
And then we flop to Danny, where she was like, Dr. Scott was my husband. Zoe thinks she's unburdened. She should have said something. 16-year secret is unacceptable. Like, that's why I was poisoning her.
Which that was a lovely like, oh, because
Yeah.
you see Danny as being like that. She's a very motherly figure towards Alfred, right? I mean, in
Yeah.
the next sentence of the first chapter, that right before you stopped, if you had kept going for one more sentence, was she walks over to him and cups his cheek and says something about like you're prepared, you're gonna be great. It was such a motherly gesture. She's knitting him a binky because his mom never knit him a binky. Like, and so you really do not like, I just saw her as the perfect, like, kind of creepy housekeeper, right? That you kind of expect and is sort of tropey and delightful. And then to find out, like, oh, surprise.
Yeah,
Great twist.
it's
Great
such
twist.
a good twist. It's also, in our this actually does sort of fit into our the way that we look at things, but like protagonist facing off the antagonist that they think is their antagonist, right?
Mhm,
Like the person the story question is answered, as you like to point out, right?
mhm,
It presented an inciting incident, answered in the climactic scene. For Alfred, he knew that the whole time that Grace had pushed Dr. Scott.
mhm.
And so his intention, maybe, was to confront her and get her to apologize and potentially kill her. We don't ever know, we don't ever actually find out what he planned to do to all of them, right? Who he planned to kill, do we?
No, I mean, the impression that I got from the way it unfolded before he died was that he didn't know who he was going to kill. What he was, at least again, my impression, he was going to let them all show up and he was seeing, like, is anyone going to stand up for me? Is anyone going to
Ah, that's what
apologize
it
and
was.
feel
Yeah.
bad? And if someone does, like if Julius had like Julius keeps saying, I meant to apologize. Well, you didn't, dude. You were there for 48 hours and you said nothing except to pick on him. If
Yeah.
when Julius had walked through the door, he said, like, man, it's so good to see you. I'm so sorry. Like, I know I was
Right.
a shit in college and blah, blah. Like, Alfred would have crossed him off the list right then and there. I'm sure of it. The whole idea
Yeah.
was, I think, take the one, whoever he was most pissed off at, and also whoever presented the opportunity and kill that person. And I'm not going to feel bad about it because each one of these people has screwed me in their own
In
way.
some way. Yeah. Yeah. I'm just wondering if like if that it's just such an interesting choice to kill him off because he never gets to do any confronting.
Yeah.
And right, so this is where I was going with that. Is like his antagonist was Grace because she was the
Hmm.
one who messed with him the most, right? Like
Yep.
she manipulated him. She's not a great person, et cetera, et cetera. Also said nothing about killing someone, right? Like she
Right.
could have just come clean. And she, in one of her POVs, she's like, I could have come clean about the Easy A stuff and I would have had a slap on the wrist. It's still, but when you're in college, it's like, that's everything, right? Your GPA, like where you,
Well, it was interesting her reaction about, like, Alfred, this is what happens to Alfred. He is exposed and he gets expelled, and it's like his life is over.
right.
Whereas later, and when Grace is thinking about it, like you said, she's like, oh yeah, like it wouldn't have been the end of the world. I would have started over. And I'm like, well, no one ever said that to Alfred, that he
I
could start
know.
over. And
Yeah.
maybe all of this could have been avoided if everyone was just like, hey, this isn't the big deal that you seem to
Maybe.
think it is. Maybe.
But also
Um,
grudges for 16 years are far more interesting for a thriller.
totally. No, 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 totally.
Um, but Danny is the final twist villain, like the true mastermind villain, right? And I think that's why I found this book so delicious. Is like we don't even know to suspect her. We don't. Nobody thinks of that she's going to be the person behind it. And there are hints, like Dr. Scott was married, but like no one ever met. Like that's mentioned
Mhm.
like a couple different times, but you don't. You're like you don't even look at it,
Nope.
right? You don't even clock it. And then when she starts to talk about what actually happened, which is just another delightful way to reveal a villain what actually happened, is like after she's like done and dusted, I'm out, like
Yep.
I did
Hops
my
in her Honda
job.
Civic and rides off
Bye.
into the sunset.
It's just so great. It's such a good final twist
Yeah.
and mastermind. And I loved the way that she chose to do this. And it probably would it have worked if Alfred hadn't died? I don't know. And we also find out that Danny like killed him when he was, his neck was broken and he was like probably not gonna make it.
He was
And
in rough shape, but it was like
he
maybe, maybe
maybe,
not.
and she straight up
But
strangles him and
she,
then
yeah,
pins it on Grace, which is delicious.
yes.
Um, yeah,
The ultimate justice there, slash
the ultimate
revenge, slash
justice.
payback.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. No,
Let's
you do.
talk.
Like I noticed it on second reading when I was going through and the hints around Danny. It's that thing that we say of just like it's all there.
Yeah,
If you know what to look for, it's all there, but it's also there in such a way that, that is not you're going into this because you have been set up to think Alfred's up to no good. All
yeah,
these people are kind of trash in some way. And so like we know someone's going to die, maybe more than one someone, but we know someone is going to die. And like they're the chess pieces that are moving around, not the old lady with the cracked earth face in the
right.
corner and her weird maid's outfit.
Yeah. Well, and
So,
we don't see her POV, so she lies to us the entire book through
yes.
Alfred's, like what she says to Alfred, how she acts, right? She's pretending to be on his side. And
Yes.
so we, through Alfred's POV, assume that she's on our side because we have no reason to suspect otherwise.
Yeah.
It's great.
Especially because it's so much, it's not like she's clearly beyond, like I go back to that too again. He was a mama's boy and he lost his mom, and so she is filling that role for him.
Yeah.
And she does it so well. Without ever, like, yes, she is 100% lying to him and lying to us, because she's lying to him and that's how we see her. But, she doesn't, I don't know. Like it's a really interesting dynamic that they have. And I think it's not that I think that she feels sympathy for him per se. I mean, he is her husband's killer or one of. So like
Yeah.
she knows what she wants out of all of this, but she is really comfortable and good at the manipulation that is required and is not just in like I think she gives suggestions at one point about like I think Alfred says something to her about like, well, who do you think it should be? And she doesn't like Julius for whatever. She's like, I think it should be him. So none of these people are sacred to her either.
No. Yeah. Yeah. Um, the dual timeline stuff, it was well done. And it's one of these things where this could have been written in dual, right? It could have been then and now. Like that is maybe something she could have considered. But I think that the framing of having the flashback is what makes it work because we we understand how these memories are coming up at this time,
Mhm.
and then they're being translated in the context of story present. So it's like,
Yes.
yes, I'm sitting here, I'm looking at Julius and remembering what a shit he was in college. I'm
Mhm.
looking at Alfred and remembering that I did this. I'm thinking about the fact that I got fired from my job at St. Vincent because I'm drinking so much and I blame Alfred for that because he did this thing. And it's the dual timeline then and now wouldn't have worked as well as what she chose to do, which is flashbacks.
Yeah, I think a couple things is normally there is more as I was noticing that even the first time I was reading through there is more than I think we would normally advise people to
Yeah.
use because they do go on like none of them go on for a super long time. This isn't like she did not belabor the point. There wasn't any point where I was just like, okay, I don't need to know. Like everything was need to know in there.
Yeah.
But I actually think if because we had so many different POVs, even though they were so skillfully done, I think if you had layered a dual timeline on top of that,
Oh, it would have been really
then it would have been
confusing.
too much.
Yeah.
I think it would have been like you're asking too many mental gymnastics of the reader. So I
Yeah.
don't know, like maybe she tried it, maybe she didn't, but I mean this was the way
It
where
worked.
it worked really well, and I think it helped in cementing everybody's different POVs too. So it
Yeah.
works to her like not just did it serve the story purpose of I need to bring in what happened in the past to make sense of the present, but also helps you understand who each of these characters are. So there it was working overtime, doing dual
Yeah.
things.
Yeah. Well said.
Well, thank you.
Yeah. Well, should we end it there? Stephanie Wrobel, thank you so much for writing a delicious,
Very
so
fun.
complicated, like, again, I really want to know how you plotted this. Um, I was so satisfied, even though it sort of like breaks the rules about how you're meant to write a thriller.
Well, it just goes to show what we do always say, and we are not the only ones who say this, is it's fine to break the rules as long
Yes.
as it is for a purpose, as long as it is
Yeah.
done in service of the story, and 100% all of the ways that she broke the mold and broke the rules here were in service of telling the best story that she could. So that's why it works.
Yeah, yeah. And the reader satisfaction very high, right?
Yes.
Even though we don't have this like traditional climactic confrontation where you're confronting the villain and then they tell you why they did it, right?
Mhm.
It's the Danny stuff at the end, I was just like, I remember reading it the first time and being like, oh my God.
Well, to the point about interiority and the way like that thrillers and mysteries and suspense are satisfying is that we understand everybody's motivations for doing what
Yeah.
they did. And we get explanations for like most, if not everything. So even if, it's not the way we would have behaved, but we understand why everybody did what they did. And it is satisfying because we did get a resolution. Chaos was brought to order, right?
Yeah. Yes.
So
Yeah.
ticked the boxes that needed to be ticked in order for readers to be satisfied at the end, even if, went off the grid in terms of like the expectations around genre and structure and form in the typical ways. So,
Perfect.
yeah, well done. Fun, fun, fun stuff. So,
All
thank
right,
you, Stephanie,
everyone. Thank
again.
you so much for listening to us chat about this. Stephanie Wrobel, thank you for writing this book.
Yes.
And we'll see you next time. And check us out on shadowsandsecrets.com.
Catch up with us, check out the retreats, check out the society, and we'll see you again next time.